G'day sew-and-sews and welcome to my sewing room. My name is Kathy and I have a really fun tutorial for you today. We're going to be making the Sunshine Crossbody Bag by Bagstock Designs. Now this is a free pattern which is fantastic and it's probably, I would say, one of the best bags to make to be making your very first proper full handbag. Have a look at this. Now this bag is just, I can't sing its praises enough. I've made dozens of these. They're great to sell, they're great to wear, and they're just a really fun make. Okay, let's get cracking. So let's have a talk first about our items that we'll need and our interfacing, and then we'll move on to our fabric in a moment, just so there's not too much going on at once. You're going to need a couple of different size acrylic rulers, and you will need like a cutting mat or something else to cut out especially that long strap, or it'll make life easier. Then I have my really good fabric scissors, my not so good fabric scissors for cutting out the interfacing because it has glue, a rotary cutter for cutting out my vinyl. If you don't have one, you can make do with scissors. I've got some pins if I need them, but you will need clips or something, or pegs or something for clipping up your vinyl strap or your cotton strap. I've got some double-sided tape to help me out with that strap. And then I've got some different types of interfacing. Now this is my light interfacing, which I'm going to be using for the lining of my bag. This is my medium interfacing, which I'll be using for the outside cotton woven pieces of my bag. It's from Spotlight. It's called Buckram, if you have a Spotlight near you. And then this one is my foam, which I'll be using for the structure of my bag. Now it is a foam iron-on interfacing, and I also got that from Spotlight. Now, when you read patterns, it will specify a lot of the time specifically what type of interfacing you'll need. For example, Decoville. Like a lot of those American ones are really hard to find in Australia. So it's fine to substitute it out for something that you find that works just as well. And me being in Australia, this is what I've found works just as well. Now you'll also need a marking tool and something to poke out your corners with. Let's have a look at my fabric and my hardware. So I'm going to be using a cotton duck for the main exterior pieces of my bag. Now it's just a cotton woven, just a little bit thicker. And I've got a quilting cotton for the inside of my bag, and then I have a vinyl for the accent pieces and my strap. I have some zipper tape. I'll need to cut out the 3 zippers, so make sure you check your pattern. Now, when I cut the zippers, I usually cut them a good 1/2 inch longer because we're going to be doing the butler method, so keep that in mind. I've got my 3 zipper pulls. Now, if you don't know how to put them on, I do have a couple of shorts. Otherwise, there's a heap of tutorials on YouTube for how to put them on. I've got some swivel hooks, some D-rings, some rivet presses. Now, if you don't have a rivet press machine, you can just sew over the straps, but I would recommend, if you're going to do that, to make your straps out of your cotton. And then I have a 3/4 inch slider for my strap. Now, before you go and cut all that out, just watch the next little segment on how to cut vinyl if you are using vinyl. Okay, let's talk about our vinyl for a moment. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that vinyl actually does have some stretch to it. A lot of vinyl anyway. So let's have a look at this scrap bit that I've just cut out to show you. So it depends on which way you're cutting it. Now, if I pull my vinyl that way, it's got stretch. Now, if I'm cutting a strap out of my vinyl, I don't want to cut it in the same direction or length as my stretch. I want to find the end that doesn't stretch and cut it out along that way. If I cut it out that way, when I'm sewing at the machine, it's going to stretch and your strap is going to twist. So when you've got your vinyl, give it a bit of a tug and see which way the stretch goes, and do your best to cut it along the other way. Okay, so here is all of my fabric and all of my interfacing cut out. So I've got my strap, which I've cut out of my vinyl, making sure it was the right way. And then I've got my side pieces, get them out of the way. Then I've got all of my internal pieces. So my inside lining, my zipper pockets and my outside pocket, and all the light interfacing which will go with that. Then I've got my 2 pieces of my foam interfacing, which is going to give our structure of our bag. And then out of my duck fabric, I've cut my 2-inch zipper tab, my strap connectors, my outside piece that has the zipper, and then the other side main panel piece. And the interfacing I've cut out for all of these pieces is the buckram. So what I want you to do now is go put on some good tunes. We're not going to worry about this one at the moment, and we're not going to be interfacing our vinyl. I want you to put on some good music and just go and interface all of your cotton pieces, and I'll see you back here in a moment. Okay, let's have a look at these straps. Yeah, so you're going to get your strap, whether it's cotton or vinyl, doesn't matter. And we're going to find the halfway point, which will be 1.5 inches because our strap is 3 inches. And we're just going to give ourselves a line down the length of it to work with. Then we want double-sided tape. Now, the double-sided tape I have isn't the best. So if you don't have double-sided tape, you can do it. It's just a little bit more fiddly. Now, I do sometimes make my straps double-sided, and I will do a tutorial on that, which means that you use vinyl on one side and a decorative fabric on the other. I'll put up a picture of one that I've made. It just gives a really pretty decorative look, but we won't worry about that for today. Unless you already know how to do it, then knock yourself out. So we're going to fold the sides into the middle. And this is where, if you have a really good double-sided tape, your life will be easier. And I definitely recommend clips for this. You don't want to be putting pins in vinyl because it will leave permanent holes. So I've got that bit done. Then I'm going to fold it in half again and clip. Now when I do this, I really want to make sure that I'm lining up those edges nice and neatly, because when we sew it at the machine, we want our top stitch to be as close to that edge as possible. So this is going to take you a little while again, so I recommend pausing me and then putting on some tunes and just enjoying the process. Now with the top stitching on my strap, I'm going to be brave today and I'm going to use a contrasting colour. Now this will really show up against the white vinyl and will look really quite pretty if I pull it off. If you're not quite game about doing it, or not confident about being able to have your top stitching perfectly straight, then go with the same colour as your vinyl or your cotton if you're using cotton for your strap. Now I'm using a top stitching thread that is made specifically for top stitching for that strap, and then I will use an all-purpose thread for the rest of the bag. Now my needle is a 90 weight. And I'm going to slow my machine right down because at the moment it's on about 3,000. So I want to slow it down to about 600 as well if you do have speed control on your machine. Oh man, that cat, I'm so sorry if you can hear her. Now, when you're doing straps like this, you do just want to go nice and slow. And generally, you do just want to sew up that side where the seam is. However, if you're doing it and you find that later on it doesn't fit into your slider because you've made a really thick vinyl strap, what you can do is go back and sew the other side as well. And that will sort of make it a little bit flatter. Now, if you were doing that, if you were sewing both sides of your fabric, you know, whether it be vinyl or other, you always want to start sewing at the same end. So if I were to do the other side, then I would start at the top end that I started from a minute ago. I'm not going to just zip across the bottom, turn it around and go back up the same side. Because even though I cut my vinyl against the stretch, doing it that way, like zipping across the bottom and coming back up the other side, will add to that twisty effect that you don't want. So to avoid those twists, you want to cut it against the stretch and make sure that you start sewing from the same end. So we want to put our slider through and then through. Now this is going to be tight because I am going with the 3/4 inch one after all. So it's going to be tight and the strap's going to be a little bit harder to slide, okay? But it does look a little bit better. So just through and through, pretty easy. Then I'm going to put it in my machine. Now, if you've got a marking tool, you can give yourself a little dot where you want to make that. So if you don't have one of these press machines, just go over to the machine and just sew a line across it. Especially if you're using cotton woven, that will be fine. Otherwise, I'm making myself a hole. And then I'm going to put my rivet through that hole. I'm just going to pop the other one on and just click it on with my hand for now. Now what I'm going to do is find the other end. So I've got that bottom side up. I'm just going to go along, make sure that I don't have any bends in it. Find the other end and put on one of my hooks so that my hook part is going to be on the outside. Slide back up again to the other end. And then I'm going to squish one end. So you see I've got the hook on the outside, put that through that slider, and then I'm going to squish all that down with my fingers and push that end up too. Now if you can find a 3/4 inch slider that is a little bit wider, maybe designed to take vinyl, then that would be ideal. But I haven't been able to find one. So I've got that hook on the outside, and then I'm going to give myself plenty of room just by moving that vinyl up in that slider. Make sure now that there are no twists in your strap, because if there are and you make it and then you find a twist in it, you're going to be sad. Okay, so again, it's all on the outside. Find the other end, put that through. So my hook is on the outside, the same way as my slider. Pop that over. Same thing, get your marking tool. Give yourself a little dot. And then make a little hole. So again, if you're using cotton or you don't have a cam press, then you can just sew across. Now this is a cam press. KAM. And it's got Cam written on the other side. So I know that it's, you know, well, it's hard to tell if anything's authentic these days, isn't it? But you want to get it from their page. And they do have pages in all countries or representatives. I've got this one, I think, in Australia from Green Beans. So what I'm doing now is putting my die press in, which is going to help set these rivets. So I'm going to pop that rivet in there, making sure that it's sitting where it's meant to be, and give it a little press. And then we want to go back down to that other end where that other one was, where we put the slider. Make sure that bottom one is seated nicely in that bottom hole. Get that right out of the way. Sit it on top. Little press. And there we go. So there's our strap done. We've got a hook at one end, and then our slider, and then our other hook should be along the length of your strap, facing outwards, and we're good to go with our strap. Okay, let's look at making this front panel first. Now I know that the pattern maker recommends putting the side panels on the other bit first, but I want to do it all at once over at the machine. So let's do this. Now I've taken a little bit of a snip out of my center of my bottom piece and my pocket lining. Now we're going to work on this bit. So I want it face up. I'm going to get my zipper with my zipper opening to the right and closing to the left. Be careful not to pull that off. Now with my panel facing up and my zipper facing down, I'm just going to lay my zipper roughly centered. That's why I gave myself some extra room on top of that bit, and I'm just going to clip it on. Now we're now going to take this over to the machine, and we're going to sew that at a 3/8 of an inch seam. At about, we're going to shorten our stitch length to about a 3. I'm going to back stitch right up to that edge. All the way down, and just give it a little back stitch at the other end as well. Done. Okay, what we're going to do now is grab our pocket lining piece, and we're going to lay it face down so our pieces are right sides together. So the right side of my exterior fabric and the right side of that pocket piece. Flip it over so you can see. Now I'm going to find that little clip that I took out of the pocket piece and my center mark, same thing of that piece, and I'm going to line them up. I'm going to whack some clips on that, and I'm going to take that back to the machine, and now I'm going to feel where these teeth are as I sew, and the pattern maker says to sew over your existing stitches, but I'm going to actually sew just below them so that I don't risk having a wonky line when I come back over. Now when I get to that main panel piece, I'm just going to back stitch over that bit a little bit, and I'm being careful to feel with this finger where those zipper tape are, and my zipper head is still pulled up the other end out of my way. And back stitch a little bit there. So there we have it with that sewn on. Now what we're going to do is just flip it over and put those pieces together. Now I've used this glitter fabric on this side, so I don't want to iron over that because it's glitter and it's glue. So for me, I'm just going to pop that over to the other side and then give that a bit of a hit with my iron to make sure that those seams are all laying flat. Now I've still got the same thread in there that I used to top stitch my strap with, because I'm going to use the same one to go all the way throughout the bag on the outside. Okay, we're going to go back to the machine and we're just going to top stitch across here at about 1/8 of an inch. So let's go do that. So I have a really nice straight stitch line on the outside of my bag. Done. Now what we want to do is turn it over, and we're going to fold this bottom pocket piece up so that the top of it lines up with that zipper and our sides are lined up, and just give that a finger press. I'm going to turn it over and you'll be able to see it a lot better now. So we're going to make sure the top is lined up and those sides are lined up and everything is nice and square. And we're going to put some clips in that, and then we're going to take it back to the machine and we're just going to sew that along the very top at 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so we're just going to go right up on that edge and we're just basting. Now, in tailoring, basting is done with a looser stitch because you generally unpick it. It's just, basting is used to hold something in place for you temporarily. So it's going to be sewn on a little bit lower when we put the top piece on in a second. Okay, so that is now basted on. What we're going to do now is get our top panel and we're going to lay it on there and line it up so it looks to us like our sides are all good. Or you can center mark it if you like, and then fold it over. And then make sure the bottom of it is lined up with the top. And then clip it on. We're going to go back to the machine again. And this time we're going to sew a little bit closer to the teeth when we sew this piece on. So you're going to aim to be about the same distance from the teeth as what you were here. So around about 3/8 of an inch. So let's go do that. Drop my foot. I can see where my teeth are. I'm going to keep my hand there. I'm going to shorten my stitch length back to around a 3 now. I'm going to back stitch over that bit, keeping this finger on that zipper so I can feel where it is. And I'm just sewing along at about 3/8 of an inch. Back stitch a little bit. Back over, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to fold it up and top stitch. Okay, so we've got that stitched on. Now, same thing, we're going to fold it up, and when we do, we want to make sure that seam is staying up. So we're folding it at that seam and going up. Now, if you have used something without a glitter, just give that a hit with the iron. I'm going to have to turn it over, make sure that seam is up. I'm in danger of that zipper head falling off, so that's something that you do want to keep an eye on. If I wanted to, I could sew over that end now as well to hold both those ends to make sure that tape doesn't come off. But I'm going to risk it for the biscuit and probably regret it. So I've ironed that up. I'm going to take that back over to the machine, and just like we did here, we're going to top stitch that at about 1/8 of an inch. And just give that a nice top stitch. Now we're going to do the next step while we're here as well. So what I'm going to do is start from up here at this corner, pretty much where I just finished, right on the edge, because we don't want to see this. And we're going to sew down across this zipper tape and then down along this edge. And what that's going to do is just hold this pocket bit in place. So when we're sewing the sides on, that pocket doesn't move around on us. Now you might be able to see my needle has shifted a little bit and gone into the plastic of that zipper foot. But I don't want to change it right now, right this second. So I'm hoping I'll be right for just 2 more seconds. Now I want to make sure when I get up to this side that I move this zipper head over into the middle, because if it's over here, I'm going to sew it outside of the bag, which is not going to be good. I'm going to hold that zipper tape together, go slowly over that zipper tape, and we're good. Okay, what we're going to do now, I'm going to use my not good fabric scissors, and we're just going to snip away that excess pocket and excess zipper tape. And up over that zipper tape. This is why I use my not good fabric scissors. So there is that unit looking pretty. Now we're going to attach the side pieces to this panel and our other panel, and then take them over to the machine and sew them all together. So I'm going to need my clips, and we'll just work on one at a time. So I need one for each side. So you want the corners to be on the outside, that piece, like that. Now in the pattern, she says to mark your center pieces, centers and line them up. I've made a million of these bags and actually find it's just a little bit better if they're just a little bit higher. It works better. And this piece will be a little bit shorter because you've got that zipper in there. So don't panic if it doesn't look like it's lining up, okay? So I'm going to move that zipper into the middle. So I'm going to take this side first and I'm just going to flip it over. So you'll be able to see that when I flip this piece over, it's just a little bit higher at the top. The point is just coming up just that touch higher, okay? And that means when I sew it and I flip it back over, it's just going to line up a little bit better. And then I'm going to clip that all the way down. So you'll see on this piece especially at the bottom now, it doesn't line up. But like I said, don't panic. So on the other side, have it up against it. It's just that touch higher, like maybe a millimeter higher. Flip it over, and just so that point, see this top line here? That point is just about a millimeter higher. And then clip it down along the edge. I'm going to put a seam guide down. Now I've shortened my stitch length back to about a 3 or 3.5, whatever is your usual length. And I'm going to back stitch. Now this is the panel that has that zipper. So I'm going to check where my zipper head is and make sure all of that is out of the way as well. And when I come down to this zipper part, I'm going to make sure, which is there, that I'm just slowing down just a little bit. There we go. Because I don't want that needle to break on me, because that's never any fun. Now I know if I leave that seam guide there, that all of these pieces are going to be sewn at exactly the same width. Where if I didn't have it there and I'm stopping and starting with all my different sides, they could all be just that little bit off. I'm going to be very careful about where I'm putting this hot iron. I want to iron this seam so it's going to the outside of the bag because we're going to top stitch over it. But when I iron, I want to make sure that I'm staying on the inside and I'm not going over that vinyl. So do this to all 4 of your seams. And then what we're going to do is take it back over to the machine once we've done that, making sure those seams are sitting to the outside. We're then going to top stitch at 1/8 of an inch along these edges on all 4. So make sure you lengthen your stitch length and keep the side of that foot lined up. If you don't have a zipper foot like what I'm using, then pick a point on your foot to line up with the outside of that seam where you want your top stitching to be, and that's where you look. So you don't necessarily have to have a foot like this one. So there we have our 2 panels, outside panels, nicely top stitched down. Now before we pop these outside panels aside, we are actually going to put our foam pieces on. So I'm just going to grab one. Now I've made life a little bit harder for myself than what it will be for you, just because I've used this glitter type fabric. So I'm actually just going to use one of my pocket pieces. And I'm just going to iron that. Now I could iron from the back, but this foam is so thick that it just won't attach from the back. So I'm being careful not to touch my vinyl. We're going to do that to both pieces, but then we're going to take it back over to the machine and we're going to stitch down the sides, so along those vinyl bits. I'm just going to take it and just stitch as close to I can, that basting thing again that I talked about before. So just on a longer stitch length so it's not all tight. So if you've used all cotton woven, then you're set. Just iron that foam into place. If you're like me and you've used vinyl, just do your middle panel and then sew down these edges. Okay, so I've lengthened my stitch length again, just because we don't need to have it, like super perfect. So I'm just feeling for the edge of that foam. So this isn't top stitching. This is just to hold that foam down in place while we work. And it will all be caught up in the seams of the bag once we're done. So you're not going to see it either. We're going to work on the connectors and the zipper tab next, just because I still have the top stitching thread left in my machine and I don't want to change over to the all-purpose thread and then go back to the top stitching thread. So first of all, we're going to work on our zipper tab. So we're going to fold the sides into the middle and give that an iron. Now I know what I said about ironing over my butterflies, but that will be on the back. So if I do mess up that glitter a little bit, I will live. And then over again. And if you didn't use glitter, you would just press that again with the iron. Making sure that I'm going on the end. If my zipper opens that way, this would be the end. I'm going to pop that on there like that in the middle and pop a couple of clips on there. Now we're going to work on our connector tabs. So same thing, we're just going to turn them over and just fold the sides in to meet the middle. If you need to, by all means, measure it and draw yourself a center line like what we did with our strap. And then whack a few clips on there. Do that to the other one, and then let's take all three over to the machine. Now with zipper tape, because it's such a small piece, I like to go literally one stitch at a time over those plastic teeth. If your machine doesn't do that, then just go nice and slow. And now our connectors. So grab your D-rings at the same time. And the same thing with the connectors. We want to stay nice and close to that edge and a longer stitch length. And just sew down the side, move those clips over. Now I'm just going to chain, which just means just sew them literally like just, one after the other. And then we'll just cut that thread in a minute. All the way down, lift up, turn them around and go back down the other side. So there's our connectors. Now we're going to fold them in half, grab our D-ring and slide our D-ring on so the flat part of the D-ring is on the inside. And then just fold that over. Now we're just going to baste that down. So again, basting is just to hold everything in place. So just a few stitches just to hold it all in place. So then when we connect it to our bag, it makes life a little bit easier. With this next bit, you've got a few choices. We're going to attach our connectors. Now the bag maker suggests that you can attach them to the side like that, or you can attach them one on this one and one on this one. But I'm going to do it the way that I have always made this bag, which is using this front panel. What I'm going to do is measure in 1.5 inches and then place it there. And then 1.5 inches from this side. Now this works out really well for where I want to place my zipper tabs and do the butler method with my zipper as well. But it will still work, like if you want to place them one on each, just make sure that when you're wearing the bag that it goes around the right way, so you don't have them both on the right side, if that makes sense. If you place them here, then follow the instructions that the pattern maker has given. So there's our connectors sewn on. I'm going to pop that piece to the side, and then we're going to grab our 2 zipper panel pieces and one of our main lining pieces. I'm going to pop that up there for a moment, grab my ironing mat, and we're just going to iron up, I almost said sew. We're going to iron up one of those long ends about 1/4 inch. This will just make our life a little bit easier later on when we are sewing that up. The next thing we're going to do is grab one of our lining pieces. Now we're going to fold it in half and just snip a little center mark at the top. There we go. Now we're going to lay it face down on the table, grab our ruler and measure 2 inches down from the top. Then we want to draw a 7.5 inch line. Sorry, a 7-inch line. So if I'm starting at the 6, I'm going to go 3.5 that way and 3.5 that way. Then I'm going to measure down 3/8 of an inch and do another parallel 7-inch line. And then I'm just going to connect them at the ends, draw a little mark pretty much at the center. And then I'm just going to draw a little triangle on each end. Now that's probably, just to give you an idea, 1 mil each side of those triangles. So that's how big they are. And then I'm going to connect the points of them. And that will be pretty much centered. Now I have eyeballed it. If you want to fuss and measure exactly, then knock yourself out. Now we're going to flip it over and then measure down 1 inch this time from the top of that piece of fabric. And then I'm going to grab one of those interior pieces. One of those zipper lining pieces. Centered. So I'm going to give myself a little snip. Little snip there. And I'm going to place it right sides together with the center mark and the center mark. And it's 1 inch down. Now what I'm going to do is pin that in place so that it doesn't shift around on me. Now we're going to be sewing up close to the top, so I'm not going to put a pin there so that I know it doesn't get in my way. Popping back over. Now we're going to take that to the machine and we're going to sew around that outside box on all 4 sides. So let's go do that. Okay, so starting up at this top corner, so I'm using this foot and I can see that my line is right in between. I'm going to backstitch. I'm going to go slow because I want it to stay on that line. Nice and neat. So down this side, I'm just going to go 1 stitch at a time. Now I'm going to teach you a trick. See how my needle hasn't quite met the end of that line yet. What I'm going to do is change my stitch length down to it's around a 1 and just drop those extra couple of stitches I needed to get it right on that line where I wanted it to. Now leaving my needle in my work, I'm turning it around and I've put my stitch length back up to a 3, so I'm not going to have these tiny little stitches. But that's something that's good to do when you're sewing something precise like this. Like I want it to be even because this is where my zip is going to be. And you're going to see it. So I'm going to drop it back down just a little bit. Put 1, 2 more stitches in there. Back up to a 3. Pivot my work. Now this isn't something that you have to be that pedantic with all the time. It's just a good trick to show you. And then I'm just going to backstitch, 1 more stitch. Okay, so there is one part of our pocket sewn on. So let's get rid of those pins and flip it around. Now we are going to open up this line. Now one of the good ways of doing this is with a seam ripper. Now what you do is you poke it through and then run your seam ripper up that line, up to the tip of that triangle. So we've just gone up to the tip of those triangles. Okay, use your good scissors and cut along those triangle lines. Now be really careful not to cut into the corners where that stitching is, but get as close to it as you possibly can. There we go. And now we're going to push this pocket through our lining just like that, very messily. But what we're going to do next is grab our iron and then iron all these seams down nicely and fuss with it a little bit to get it nice and flat and looking good. Get it where you want it to sit, and then with a good hot iron, give that a press. I'm going to use double-sided tape again. Now this is a much narrower one. If you don't have any narrow double-sided tape, just do it like she explains in the pattern and just pin it in place. Now this tape can be a little tricky to get off, so I hope I don't fuss with it too much. Oh, she got lucky. And then this bit. Now I've cut this zipper again longer than what I need it to be. Now I'm going to place it. I'm going to pull that down a little bit, although you do want it as closed, to keep it as closed as you can. You don't want to be trying to place an open zipper. And then I'm going to place that over the top, making sure that I have enough at both ends, which is why I've cut it so nice and long. And then just get it sitting where you want it to be, making sure, of course, that your zipper head is on the outside. Now that I've got it where I want it to be, I'm going to just pull that zipper end close to the end so that it's all sitting even. Now I'm going to take that over to the machine, and at 1/8 of an inch, I'm going to sew around that entire box, going nice and slow over these ends. Let's go do that. I'm starting just a little bit in front of that zipper tape. I'm going to move that head out of the way just for a moment. I've got a stitch length, probably about 3.5. And again, I'm going to line up that edge roughly with the edge of that fabric. I'm going to lift my presser foot, pull that head up out of the way, and keep going. I'm using my, it's called a purple thing, but it's actually pink because this is a knockoff one off Temu, although Amazon has the different coloured ones, just to help smooth that fabric as I go. And just one stitch at a time there. And I have changed over to my all-purpose thread rather than that top stitching thread that I had in there. So I'll use the all-purpose thread for the lining and stuff, and then when I think I'm done with top stitching. If we do need to do more top stitching, then I will swap back over. So I'm going to open that up again to get past that zipper head. One more stitch there, and then up over that zipper tape. I'm just going to squeeze that zipper tape shut with my fingers there. And then back stitch a little bit over the ends of that zipper tape. There is our zipper in. Now let's flip it over and we'll trim down using your not good fabric scissors and being very careful not to cut into any fabric. Cut off the ends of that zipper tape. Throw that on the floor. Now we're going to grab our other piece of zipper panel and we're going to lay it with that ironed edge down the bottom, and then line it up right sides together with that other piece. And then I'm going to grab some clips or some pins, whatever floats your boat, and pin that. And we're going to go back over to the machine and we're going to sew these two pieces together. But before we do that, we need to talk about it a little bit. So we're not going to sew that bottom edge. That is a no. Don't sew that bottom edge. Okay, if you need to mark it to remind yourself, do so, because that's where we turn our bag out from. Now, when we sew it at the machine, we don't want to lay it down like this and just zip around, because you'll see it on this side. So we're going to fold down the top, and then we're going to sew along the top. And then we're going to fold in that side, sew down the side, fold in the other side, and sew down that side. So let's go do that. Pull my threads out of the way. So I'm going to fold that top piece down out of the way, and at about, I don't know, a 1/4 inch, 3/8 of an inch. It's about 3/8, a little bit more than a 1/4. And back stitch. And I'm just using my finger to make sure that I'm nowhere near that other piece of fabric. You don't want to be sewing over your lining panel piece. Into that corner. And then leaving my needle down in my work so it's easy to pivot. Lift up my zipper pocket pieces. Bump the camera. Fold under that piece. Now I can feel the zippers there, so I want to stay nice and close to the end while making sure that I'm catching both pieces of pocket. Down just to that iron mark. Snip. And then I'm going to do the other side. Just keeping all the rest of that fabric up and out of the way. And just down to that iron mark so it's easier to fold up a bit later. Back stitch. Done. Then we're going to grab a main panel piece, our zipper, and our other lining piece. So this is the exciting bit. We're starting to assemble. So with your main panel piece facing upwards, you're going to grab your zipper and you're going to place it downwards with the zipper opening to the left, and so your zipper tab is on the right. Then you're going to line up the edges together. So this is why I like, another reason why I like doing my connectors at the top. What I do is I line up my zipper tab with that connector, and that gives me the space that I want at the edge of that corner, because you don't want your zipper tab all the way up on the edge. We need to leave enough room for our seams, and so it doesn't get all caught up in it either. And then I'm just going to clip along the top. Okay. Then I'm going to grab this other lining piece. I'm going to lay that right sides together on top. I'm going to line up this top edge with the top edge of the zipper and that other piece. Now you'll see that the top lines up and sides line up, but then you've got a gap down the bottom. It's fine. That's normal. Don't worry about it if you see that. And then we're going to clip this big sandwich together. So I'm just going to shift those clips that I already had on there. You can use as many as you need. And just clip along that top edge with my marking tool. So let's make that line right on the edge of that connector tab. See that? And then flip it over and give yourself a line right on the edge of where that connector tab is, which is the same as what we did on this end, which will be nice anyway. What we're going to do now is take that back over to the machine, and we are going to sew all of this together. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but I can see where my zipper teeth are. You don't want to sew over your zipper teeth. You want to stay just above it. Okay, and we're going to start at the end that has the zipper tab, because we're going to do the butler method with the zipper. So I'm going to line it up. I've got my stitch length at about 3.5, and I can feel my tape. Now there is a lot of bulk here, so I'm going to go slow. I'm going to backstitch a little bit. So as I get to my zipper tape, there's going to be a lot of bulk there. So I'm just going to whack my hump jump under there and move my clip just to get up over that, and then the connector. Now what I'm going to do is just open it up for a minute and make sure that metal D-ring is pointed down, like it's not caught up where I'm about to sew. You don't want to sew over your D-ring because your needle will shatter. I've learnt that the hard way several times because I've forgotten. And my zipper head is pulled right up to the end. So just nice and slow, and you'll be able to feel where that zipper tape is, that zipper, the plastic zipper part. And now I'm getting up to where that other D-ring is. I want to make sure all this hardware is pulled down, and I'm not going to sew over anything. I'm coming up to that other connector. I can feel it there, and I can see my line that I've made for myself. Now I'm going to stop at that line. Okay, now I'm going to open up this zipper. So there's my zipper head. I'm going to lift up my presser foot, and I'm going to pull that zipper head down out of the way, past that D-ring. Now this end of the zipper tape, I'm just going to pull down out of the way, and then this end of the zipper tape, I'm going to lift my presser foot with my needle down, and I'm going to pull that zipper tape up at that 90-degree angle. Okay, so pretty easy. If you need to watch that over a few times, then just pause me and go ahead. And I'm going to sew over slowly that zipper tape, reverse a little bit, and then go as I was right up to the end, and then backstitch a little bit. Now let's go and see how pretty that is. Okay, so that is all sewn down. Now you'll notice that this bit is quite long. I'm going to leave it there until I finish top stitching the top, so it's actually stitched down twice, which will make it nice and strong and reinforced. I forgot, like, I'm not done with top stitching. So we're going to fold it over and then finger press it as best we can. Now look at how nice that zipper just disappears into the bag like that at that nice curve. That is really pretty. Now we're going to flip it over, and we're going to iron this seam down flat as best we can, because we're going to top stitch. So we are ironing it down towards the foam side, towards the main panel of our bag. Now, you're not going to get it to lay perfectly flat. That is just a fact of life, that it's not going to do that for you, but we're going to clip it and stuff as well. And that's why we top stitch, because that seam otherwise won't sit flat. I'm going to iron it from this lining side as well. I'm going to be really careful not to go up to those ends where I could accidentally hit that vinyl. because at this stage of the game, if you do that, it could end in tears, and that won't be fun. Now I'm going to open that zipper up. I'm going to get some clips, and I'm also just going to clip that down, because as it cools down, that seam is going to want to open up and bunch up on you. And those ends where we didn't get to iron it as flat as we wanted, I'm going to pop one on the side and then on this side as well. So back to the sewing machine again, and we're going to top stitch at about 1/8 of an inch along this top edge. Okay, needle in my work, change my stitch length back to my top stitching length, which is about a 4.5, making sure that lining is down and out of the way. And for the first couple of stitches, I'm going to use my automatic one, and then I'm going to go. Now there is a lot of layers that I'm sewing over. Now this is also why I left that connected tab and mill also hanging off. So here when I'm top stitching, I'm grabbing that mill that I had left over. So it's going to reinforce that little bit a bit more. And then when I get to this bit, it's a bit of a bump. So again, one stitch at a time. And then just nice and slow and carefully. We want this to look pretty. I'm coming up to that other bump. Now I know on my domestic machines I need to use my hump jump at that bit, but on this one I know I'll be right. So if you need to, use it. And then there's that other connector. So nice and slow. And the zipper tab. So nice and slow with whatever machine you have. Okay, now I'm going to close that zipper, because that being sewn down there is now going to hold it in place. I'm going to leave these clips in place just to make sure that lining doesn't flop up on me. Just while I'm doing this, you don't want that lining to get caught up. So main panel pieces, right sides together with the top lining up with that zipper. So the sides will line up, but again, the bottom won't. That's fine. It's because we've got that zipper there. So you'll see that your D-rings want to sit up. Keep that in mind, that they are there. And I'm just going to clip this top panel piece to that bottom one along that top edge. Now again, use as many clips as you feel you need to. I've made this bag quite a few times, so I'm a little bit more confident. Now I am going to find my marking tool again, and I'm going to mark where that zipper finishes at the edge of that connector. So on that side first, then I'm going to grab my lining piece, flop this over, we're making a big sandwich. Lining pieces together. Same thing, your sides are going to line up. You want to line up the top, the bottom is going to look a mess. Don't worry. And then we're going to clip that all together. We are making a very big sandwich. Now I'm trying not to get my head in the frame by leaning over all of this too much, but you get up close as you need to with your bag to make sure that the edges of those pieces and your zipper tape all line up. Now I can mark this bit, because I'm not sure what side's going to be facing up towards me at the sewing machine. I just can't think of it. without looking at it. Okay, so you won't have as many clips down this end because that's where your zipper and your connector tab and everything is. So you've made a nice big sandwich that is going to look messy as, don't worry about it. It's all going to come together in a minute. So we're going to go back over to the sewing machine and same thing. We're going to start at the end where your zipper tab is. And we're going to sew along this edge up until we get to that mark. We're going to move our zipper head out of the way when we get close, and we're going to make sure our D-rings are out of the way. Okay, so again, starting with at the end where that zipper tape is, and my stitch length is back to about a 3.5, and I'm using my all-purpose thread. Now I'm going to make sure that D-ring is pulled down and out of the way. I do not want to sew over it. I do want to get as close to those zipper teeth as I can so that you don't have a whole heap of zipper tape sewing. It just makes the bag look a little nice and you don't get that wave in your zipper tape. So we're getting close to the end, and I know that other D-ring is coming up. And I've also got that internal zipper tab that I want to make sure is out of the way because I've used quite a big one. That D-ring is out of my way. Fold that sucker right down. And up close. And now I'm going to open up that zipper tape again. Get that zipper head out of the way. Double check that D-ring. Make sure I've got all my layers up to my mark. I'm going to stop with my needle down in my mark. Zipper tape up at a 90-degree angle. Over it. Back over it. And then up to the end. Back stitch a little bit. Okay, so again, we're going to leave that piece nice and long. Look at how good this is looking. So I'm going to open that up, and we're going to do the same thing where we're going to iron this bit flat. So I'm going to have all three sides, 1, 2, 3, facing that way, and then push this seam this way down towards that foam. And I'm going to try and convince it to lay in that direction. Then I'm going to open it up so that lining piece is there. And I'm sorry if you can hear Pumpkin. She's having a hissy fit. I did stop filming for a little while and I did go and give her some attention. She had upsies and cuddles, so I haven't neglected her all day, I promise. Same thing as we did last time. I'm going to open that zipper up, turn it around and grab my clips. And again, I'm going to clip these lining pieces down, and I'm going to clip along this top. And then we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to take it back to the machine and top stitch. Poor cat. Oh, she has anxiety problems. She has a little bit of separation anxiety. I didn't know cats could get it, but apparently they can. We're working on it. Okay, we're going to go back to the machine and we're going to top stitch, same as we did before. Okay, so here we have all of our panels and everything put together. How great does that look? Now I'm going to do something. If you don't want to do it, don't do it because it deviates from the pattern. But I find that this makes the bag sit a lot nicer. Okay, so like I said, if you don't want to do it, don't do it because we've come such a long way. And if we mess this up here, it can be a little bit catastrophic. So make sure that your lining is sitting flat on the inside and all those layers are down. What I'm going to do is get my ruler. I'm going to put the corner right in that point and then line it up with this edge until it's right level with one of those lines. So one of those lines is lined up exactly with it. It doesn't matter what line, it will do it. So you might be able to see it's lined up right at that 3/4 mark, and it's perfectly in line with this. Then I'm going to get my rotary cutter and I'm going to cut that bit off. Okay, so it's just about 1 mil. I swallowed then because it made me nervous doing that. Now, you can do this at the beginning, but it means that you have to do it to each piece of your corners, then your interfacing, then your foam, then your lining. So I do it at the end. If you're not going to do it, don't do it. Go and watch that Better Boxed Corners one and, do it at the beginning of your next bag or whatever. But it just gives a little bit of a wider angle so that when we sew it together in a minute, it's going to sit, the whole bag is going to sit flat. Okay, so rewatch that if you need to, zoom in, see what I mean. Do that to all 4 corners, making sure your lining is in place. And I'll see you back here in a moment if you're game. If not, don't worry. Now we're going to take our 2 main lining panels and pop them together. Fold it over, and so our lining panels are together. Actually, we can cut off these extra long zipper bits now too. Okay, so main panels together, lining panels together. I'm going to open up this zipper a little bit to get that zipper head out of the way, so it's about halfway. I'm also going to open up this interior zipper about halfway. Okay, now what I want to do is find all these middle seams and line them up. So my main exterior panel pieces are lined up nicely there. And then the same thing on the other end. Now we're going to whack some clips down along the sides. Now you want to do the main panel piece first. I just find it works better. Now your corners might not all line up and your bottom might or not line up. Don't worry too much about it at this point. And then make sure your lining is lying flat. Same thing. So with those corners and everything not being perfect, when we do our seams, it's quite forgiving, and then you can cut away that excess fabric. What I could have done is lined it all up and then gone along and trimmed it and then come back and filmed, but I wanted you to see that, it's okay for that to happen. This corner's nice, this one not so much, but it will still all work. So if yours looks like that, it's normal. So now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to start from one of these main exterior panel pieces. We're going to sew all the way up and then down all the way onto the lining side. On this side, we're going to start at a good sort of 3/8 to 1/2 of an inch inwards. Okay, we're going to stick at that seam width all the way up. Now a zipper tab is there, so we know we certainly don't want to go wider than that, which is why we gave ourselves plenty of room at the end. We're going to go over there, and as we come down on this lining side, when we get down closer to the bottom, we're going to start to go out a little bit until we're about 5/8 of an inch. So we're going to finish, sorry, I went out of frame. We're going to finish at about 5/8 of an inch down here. So we're going to sew down the lining side and just get a little bit wider as we go down to that bottom bit. And the reason for that is that we want the lining to fit nicely inside of the main part of the bag. So we're going to go back over to the machine and do that on both sides. If you want to do that, if you want to mark it up like that, by all means, make your life easier. Okay, back to the machine. Okay, so I'm going to start about 3/8 of an inch in. I'm going to start with my needle in my work. I'm going to back stitch. I'm going to go nice and slow up to this top corner piece. Now I can feel that D-ring is there, and it's my zipper tab is quite thick, so that's why we wanted to leave that good sort of inch bit at the end for when we did this. Okay, up to the very top, you might need your hump jump for that bit. And then, like I said, 3/8 of an inch. And then as we get closer to the bottom, shift that over if you need to as you work. We're going to go a bit wider. We end up at about 5/8. There we go. Now, while we're here, because we don't need to go back to the table to do this bit, we're going to turn it around, and then we're going to sew along the bottom. I'm going to start with my main panel piece, and again, a good 3/8. I'm just taking it easy. Sorry if the camera is jumping a little bit. It's my table jumping around a little bit as well. All the way across, remembering to back stitch well at the beginning and the end, because this bag, we want it to be strong. Now flip it over and have a look, and just make sure that you caught both sides. So if you have a look at your inner seam, you'll be able to see your fabric all the way through. Okay, and then flip it around. Now this bottom piece, you'll be doing much wider. I've actually got it at about an inch because one side ended up pulling a little bit when I was top stitching, and I just lost a little bit of length. But usually about 3/4 of an inch. You want this bottom piece to be, again, a little bit smaller so that it fits inside the interior of the bag. But also double check the pattern and what she says. I'm pretty sure she says it's about 3/4 of an inch. And then make sure you've caught both sides. Let's go back to the table and talk about how to sew these corners. Okay, now you just want to trim these edges where it was a little bit longer to about 1/4 of an inch seam. And then if you do have any long bits along your main zipper or your main panel piece as well, then trim those down. Now what we want to do with these corners, we're going to grab our corners by the innermost corner piece, pull them, line up our seams, and then clip them. Okay, so again, grab those inner bits, those inner corners, pull them to the side, line up those seams, line up those edges, and clip. Don't worry if they're not perfect, especially if you were like me and you did that, you took that edge off, because when we sew it, we're going to have a seam allowance, and that's going to give us some wiggle room. So again, pull apart, line up those inner seams. So that seam and that seam, we want lined up. Squish it together and then whack some clips. Now on here, you've got a couple of layers of vinyl. You've got all that foam. You've got all that interfacing. It's not going to be perfect, so don't panic. And then this one, pull that apart, line up those seams and clip. Now we're going to take this over to the machine and we're going to sew straight across all of these seams. Now on these ones, we're going to give ourselves a good 3/8 of an inch, and on these ones almost the same, maybe a little bit less, but you do want to make sure that you are grabbing all of it. Now at this bottom seam, you want to make sure that it's laying flat and this seam is laying in the other direction. So this side seam, I'm going to push to the right, and this bottom seam, I'm going to push to the left, and then I'm going to clip it. So then on my other side, my other corner, which is already popped undone, I want to make sure that bottom seam is laying in the same direction. So it's going that way, and then my side seam is going that way. And whack a heap more clips on there. Okay, and over to the machine, and we're going to sew that. Okay, so make sure that zipper pocket is up out of the way. I'm going to do my lining pieces first. Get that up out of the way. Like I said, we've got a nice wide seam allowance on this, so it is forgiving. I'm going to back stitch all the way across. Make sure I've caught both sides. And then the other one. Needle down, holding that seam down, back stitch, then all the way across. Now we are going to lay this down and we're going to squish it. Do not be afraid of manhandling your bag and squishing it down. Now I've got my seams laying the way that I wanted them to. I'm coming in just a little bit. There's still probably about 3/8 of an inch there, honestly, because I want to make sure I'm catching both sides. I'm going slow and I'm back stitching. I want that seam laying flat up over that seam. And then up and then back stitch. Now I'm going to go back to the beginning and I'm going to do that again because I want this bag to be strong. I'm going to come in just like 1/2 mil above that way towards the main part of the bag, above that line, and just do that again and back stitch. I'm going to turn it over and make sure I caught every piece of that. So here is what our bag looks like. Now we want to stick our hand up through that open bit of zipper. Okay, now we're going to turn this bad boy out. So I'm going to poke one of those corners into my hand. And then I'm going to birth the bag, which means I'm going to pull it out of that zipper pocket. Now, I look like I'm being really rough, but I'm also being careful, because if you hear any ripping noises at this point, you need to go back, find it, and sew it back up. So I'm just working it all through. Now, if this takes you a little bit, it's okay. I've made a couple of dozen of these bags before, so I've had a little bit more practice at doing that. I'm going to poke those corners out with my fingers. Now that corner is sitting a little bit flatter than it would have been if I hadn't have cut those corners off. So if you didn't do it with me this time, think about doing it if you make another one. Poke out that top bit where that zipper tab is. Fingers right in there. Okay, that is looking really good. Right, oh, now this zipper pocket. This is why we ironed up those edges earlier. So just going to fold them up, tuck them up, fold up that side, and then either clip or pin along the edge. Let's go back. Sew this seam closed at about 1/8 of an inch. Then we're done. We'll just give it an iron, put our handle on, and bada bing, bada boom. Stitch length at about a 3, 3.5, whatever your usual setting is. Back stitch. Make sure you are close enough to that edge that you are catching both sides, because you don't want to put anything into your zipper and then have it disappear down into the depth of the inner makings of your bag. All the way across, check that you've got both sides. Machine off, back to the table. Okay, so just make sure that you've caught both sides and make sure you've trimmed all your threads as you go as well. There's nothing worse than having loose threads, especially if you're selling. You want to make sure everything is as good as you can get. Now we're going to stuff all that in there. Make sure your corners are poked down. Grab your iron. Now I do have quite a little iron that I would usually use for this, but I can't find it anywhere at the moment. Again, being super careful of that vinyl. If you get to this stage and you hit that vinyl, you are going to make yourself cry. Now, if I hadn't have used a glue, I would then put my hand in there and very carefully iron over the top of that as well. But I've used a glitter one, so I'm not going to do that. Zip up our outside bit. And look how nicely that is sitting. Then I'm going to find my strap. Turn this around towards me so I can see. I'm going to pop my strap onto the bag. And look at that. How gorgeous is that? So there we have it. So thanks for coming along with me. If you liked it, like and subscribe and all that jazz. I'll be doing more bag tutorials in the future and getting some more of the sort of bigger and more complex bags that I make. So stick around with me. I hope you enjoyed the ride as much as I did today. Okay, see you later. Bugger.